So, Manav, as I see it, at this point of time, and I'm not talking pre-COVID and post-COVID, I think there are three sets of things we need to see. One is obviously demand. Before anything else is solvency, right? I think for a lot of hotel owners and investors, a bigger challenge is solvency. How do they steer through this crisis, remaining solvent, right? And you can obviously solve for a solvency risk by working with the financial institutions, as Vinodji said, that you have to work really constructively with the financial institution. Now, unfortunately, what we're seeing there is while there's a lot of directional guidance coming from RBI, but transmission to businesses is next to nil, at least to hotel sector. So policy rates have been reduced, but the risk exposure has gone up to the hotel industry. So I'm not seeing tangible reduction in interest rates in the near term. RBI talks about them enabling the banks to give more credit lines, not happening so easily. So I think first is the solvency issue, which has to be dealt with by RBI, not so much by the government directly, by RBI, right? The second issue is demand, because I do think that the biggest risk we'll face in the short term is hotel demand. And trust me, and that's a question that will worry us after we are out of the woods from COVID. So today we have COVID, hotels are shut, there's hardly any business. Once this epidemic evaporates, trust me, the empathy will also evaporate from government and everybody. So you're left on your own because there's no talk of an epidemic. And that's when the demand will hit us really hard. And a large part of hotels that we own in India, at least the panel that I see here, Mr. Saraf, Sanjay, JB, a lot of us, Ankur, we have hotels which are dependent on business traveler. And we do think there'll be sectors and there'll be source markets which will be displaced for a much longer period of time. And I think that's where GST becomes really important. Because if you do reduce GST for a period of time, you can induce a little higher degree of demand from certain source markets, let's say domestic, certain segments. So I think GST is something, I've always said GST is not worth talking, but in today's context, I do think that pushing demand creation is really, really critical. The second, as I think Sanjay mentioned, is we are aware of the fact that revenues are going to fall short of what we had invested our capital for. And some way to recover that is to reduce operating expenses. Now, we'll do what we need to do, right? And I think all of us have already taken those steps, but we need that enabling support from the authorities as well. Minimum demand charges on electricity, property taxes, excise licenses, all other indirect costs that we've been facing. If government brings but it can't be interim, it can't be 6 months and 9 months the way government is thinking right now. Everything is June, extended to August, at worst case till December. We're talking about a 2-3 year recovery period. So all of this OPEX reduction needs to be provided for 2.5, 3 years, right? The last thing that I'm worried right now, and I may be selfish, is CAPEX. Because when you talk about FSI and all of those things, that's to promote fresh investment. And I do think that that's least of my worry right now, whether we have concerns on the supply side. Of course, when you reduce, increase FSI, enable lower development costs, that will definitely induce more supply. But right now, I'm worried about A, on the demand side, and B, I'm worried about what's my cost of running a business in India. And I think both of those, I don't see an intelligent discussion, let alone with the government. I don't even see an intelligent discussion between the hotel forums also, and that worries me, that I don't think we have a cohesive voice. I don't think we know what we want, by the way, right? So if you see what went from Faith to WTTC to FHRI to CII, it was a long list of needs that we had put in front of the government, which has very little to give. So I think my sense is we need to definitely focus on demand. GST will be a big push for demand, right? I think we need to focus on reducing operating expenses for a prolonged period of time. Let's not talk 6, 8, 9 months. I do think that solvency is something that while RBI is making a lot of noise about, we have not yet seen direct transmission happening to businesses. And on the supply side, I think we need to wait and watch, because we need to wait out for 2020 to end before one of us starts becoming brave to say, another $50 million for building a new hotel. There used to be a section called 1023G, which was removed by the government. The 1023G, which was about 14, 15 years back, allowed borrowers in the infrastructure sector, which included hotels then, their interest income to be exempted from tax for the lender. So there used to be a section 1023G, I remember, at least in 2004-5. Even at that point of time, we did not see direct transmission of that happening to the sector. So we should investigate 1023G, which was there in 2004-5-6, and then it was removed. On the product, I have a bit of a different view. My view is that any discussion of hotel product changing because of Corona is far-fetched. Because if that was to happen, first airlines have to redesign themselves. I just can't imagine that if you're okay to travel in an airline, why would you complain staying in a hotel room where you have separated by walls? So I think a discussion of hotel product changing because of Corona, I'm not able to get my head around it, honestly. The offices have to change, airlines have to change, malls have to change, and I'm not seeing them changing, by the way. I think the way we look at it, and by the way, we own hotels like Formula One, which is now Holiday Inn Express, where there's no restaurant. And one can say, oh, you were designed for future because you have no F&Bs, there's no banqueting. I still have a problem in Holiday Inn Express today as much as I have in a Sheraton. The fundamental root cause is not the product. The fundamental root cause is hotel industry in India is based on very high fixed cost. And therefore, when something like this happens and you have seen a significant portion of your revenue receipt, you're left very exposed with a very high fixed cost structure. Now, today this is Corona, and therefore we're talking about product. Tomorrow, it could be something else where the revenue recedes to the same extent. What will we do then? So I think we need to address the root cause, and which is the industry has a very high fixed cost, which means the day our revenues fell by 90%, we realized that most of our expenses in that hotel were actually fixed in nature. And that's why we've been burning and getting into a solvency risk. I don't think product alone is the discussion point for long term. I don't think hotel products need to change. Because if hotel product needs to change, I need to really ask JB here, is Indigo going to retrofit its aircraft and make sure instead of X number of people, there are only going to be 20% people flying in aircraft? So I think product, nothing will change. My own view in future, not a single change needs to be made to hotel product because of Corona or because of social distancing. We have all social distancing. We put two different people across the walls, right? Our restaurants, GFA was very, very generous. I think what we need to change is a fixed cost structure. Because if you just change the product and continue to with the same fixed cost structure, next time Corona won't happen, something else will happen, and you'll still be in the same problem. This is not given by the government. So government, I want to take credit for everything, but this is given by RBI. And this is not given to the hotel sector. This has been given to the banking sector. I have been saying it from the day one of the crisis that for this current crisis, the issue is as much as with banks as with the borrowers, because it is not a problem created by the borrower. It's a problem created by the environment. And the first thing the banks should have done is to take a write-off in their own books. So whatever is being done right now is to preserve banks from taking a write-off in their own books. Current situation is helping the P&L of the banks, not the P&L of the hotel companies, because it's a moratorium, it's not a waiver, which means every single month my P&L continues to carry that interest cost, which means losses are increasing. For the banks, all that is doing is every quarter their loan book is growing because my interest is now accumulated for a quarter or 2 quarters. So Manav, I have been very, very clear. Moratorium or one-time restructuring, while it really helps all of us breathe easy, not be stressed at night, but let's make no mistake, it is actually done 70% for the banking sector and only 30% for the borrowers. The most elegant thing for a borrower right now, and all of us collectively do, is to go to the banks and say, no shame, the whole sector is a non-performing asset, take a 40% write-off in our books and then we'll talk to you. But right now, every single borrower in this sector is working hard to make sure the banks don't take $1 of write-off. So I want to set the record straight. Moratorium or a restructuring is not a favor to the hotel sector, or for that matter, any sector of the economy. Moratorium and a one-time restructuring is a benefit given to the banking sector so that their P&Ls remain strong through this crisis. Second, I think moratorium is good because what it allows you to do is think in a little more. I've been telling people that never think about business when you're hungry and when you're sleepy. I also tell people don't think about business when you're in a lockdown. So what this does is that it allows you to go back to a desk and think in a sane manner what to do about your business in the future. So to that extent, the moratorium is really important because it doesn't put a pressure on you for the next month, but it is not the solution. The solution will come from trying to restructure the loan. Now people have only one definition of restructuring, which is declare an NPA, take a write-off. No, restructuring means where the current borrower and the current lender are trying to find an elegant solution which works in the long term. And sometimes it does not require any provisioning losses. So I think the first step was moratorium. It was absolutely required to ensure there is short-term solvency. There will be more things which we expect to come, which will provide a longer-term solution between the lending and the borrowing institutions. So I think from an RBI perspective, so far, so good. I think I thank them for the fact they brought moratorium fairly early on, the fact they've extended up till end of August. I think there's a lot of confusion today about moratorium. Globally, the definition of moratorium means the interest gets added to the principal outstanding, whereas in India, the definition of moratorium is the interest needs to be paid immediately after the period of the moratorium. Wouldn't work, right? So I think there's a lot of policy clarity we can do well with, but I think it was a fantastic first step. We are waiting for the second step right now, but I will, at the cost of repeating myself, state moratorium or one-time restructuring is not a favor for the hotel sector. We alone should not be asking for it. If you see IBA, which is Indian Banking Association, every single bank CEO, right from HDFC to Axis Bank, has appealed to RBI to allow one-time restructuring. So it's a much larger problem for the entire banking sector, not just for us as individual borrowers. But Manav, just to course correct here, when we speak to a lot of authorities, the view is, why are you complaining? We never did anything for the auto sector last year. You know, they had the whole BS6, BF5 massive issue which completely wiped out the auto sector last year. Did they listen to the auto sector? The answer is no. JB obviously has roots into the aviation sector indirectly. Have they done a lot for the aviation sector in the last few months? They only allow Air India to charge full fare to get people into India. They have not allowed any private airline to get that share of revenue. So they have not done anything for the aviation sector. When you ask both RBI and the government, the view is we have not done anything for any sector. But if you see, we've done stuff for MSMEs. So even small hoteliers, you know, who qualify to be MSMEs, who have borrowing limits for less than 25 crores, we have given them full protection. A small innkeeper in Bhopal who employs less than 40, 50 people, and most of those people make them less than 15,000 rupees, we will provide provident fund for them. So the moment you speak to people within the establishment, the view is we haven't taken an approach to support any specific sector, but if you see a lot of things we've done on MSMEs, you know, it covers everybody, including hotel sector. We have not excluded hotel sector from there. So I think we should also calibrate our expectation when we look at other sectors, especially like auto and airlines, which have been equally, if not worse hit with what we're going through right now. And I think when you talk to the government, you know, this intercom has only one-way communication. You can only hear them, they can't hear you. So I think it's not fair to expect a lot of direct benefits will come to any sector. Number two, I think associations should be all dissolved. I think they're archaic. They don't even know what they're asking for. They started shouting about moratorium before they knew the moratorium is going to be the problem, not the solution. They never spoke about one-time restructuring. Why is it so? I don't know. This industry has always been about wine and cheese, and associations are great places to have wine and cheese parties. So my own personal view is that most of them should be completely dissolved. Now, how do you recreate another association will again be the same ineffective process. But it's honestly 95% time wasted when you go to any association. No, they work hard, but Mr. Saraf is smiling because whether it's Mr. Saraf or JB or Mr. Chaudhary, they all will do what they have to do through back channels, right? You know, they don't need to necessarily blast an article in ET, which nobody reads except for ourselves. So Sanjay, I'm not saying people are not great. People have made all, see, as a CEO, I ask people sometimes, have you worked hard or have you produced results? Because if you've just worked hard, you're of no good use to me. So my view is, have we worked hard as industry people? We have worked really hard, all of us, you and I included, right? Have we all failed? Absolutely, yes. And the other thing is response to a crisis. You know, and the way I will try and differentiate is that it's great for somebody to go and run every day to keep his heart healthy. It's not great for somebody to run in the morning of a heart surgery, you know, so, and by the way, they are quite related to each other. So I think today, what we're talking about clustering and bringing efficiencies is a long-term issue. It was required before COVID, and it will be required post-COVID, whether the industry recovers completely. But let me be honest with you, we operate a Holiday Inn Express portfolio with a staff ratio of 0.35. If I include the corporate staff, 0.39. And my problem is the same. I have a very, very senior GM who just messaged me in a frustration saying, all of you guys are talking about cutting cost. We can deal with that, but who's going to talk about demand? So I think the fundamental problem right now is I can understand his frustration. He's dealing with two sets of problems right now. One set of problem is he has got no demand. And the other set of problem, whether we'd like to present it as an opportunity, is massive loss of employment. Now, when you're trying to create efficiencies in the long term, it works well. But when you're trying to retrench 1/3 of the workforce in a sector within a period of a quarter, it's a massive, massive, massive loss of employment, people's lives, their ability to pay salary, to pay rents and to pay EMIs. So I do feel the fact that we need to continue to focus on the problem that people, I always tell hoteliering is about three things: the buildings we own, the people we serve, and the people who serve. You know, we've already lost one pillar, which is the people we serve. I think we're rapidly losing the second pillar, which is people who serve people, right? And we'll be left with these fixed assets, right? So I do think we need to address this issue of employment. I think we cannot stay away from our responsibility. While we have to do what we have to do, which means we have to take care of our P&Ls, but on the side, we need to ensure that we create an enabling environment for that 1/3 workforce. I do believe that 1 in 3 people are losing jobs in the sector right now, right? So I do think that something needs to be done. So far, unemployment has been used as a carrot to get something from the government. It has not been used as a true factor of empathy or something to be done by the industry. So my own view is we have flocked in unemployment with various associations to get some benefits, but we have never thought really at night that, oh geez, there are 100 people that yesterday lost their ability to pay school fees or their rents from next month. So I think the efficiency in the sector was long due. The efficiency in the sector could be accelerated by this pandemic, but I do think that we are in a crisis right now, and the problem is of demand on one side, and the problem is of employment on the other side. The efficiency is not an immediate problem. It is something that we should have done long back. Thankfully, maybe we'll do, once we are out of this crisis. So I think everybody in the sector who's employed is at risk right now, and I don't think it's differentiated by age. It's not differentiated by seniority. It's not. It may be differentiated by your perceived, rating. I do think the industry will obviously try and wean off a low-rated talent before they let go of high-rated talent. So I do think one thing that I agree with Mr. Saraf is that there may be some natural selection at work right now, where post-COVID you may be left with, because every hotel GM is trying to protect high-talent employees right now. So at the end of this crisis, you may be left with a higher quality of talent pool. But I don't think, Manav, there is any, it's truly a pandemic. When you look at pandemics definition from a healthcare perspective, it truly is an economic pandemic and also an employment pandemic. It is not differentiated. That's my view. That's what I see across in our system.
Okay.
I don't think the answer is black and white. Try and understand, all of us have real serious capital invested in the sector right now. And protecting the value in that capital is a more exciting path for us than necessarily scouting for problems. And let me also tell you that if somebody thinks the opportunities are going to come tomorrow, no. There's going to be a systematic issue in this sector which will leave opportunities open for the next several years, right? So I always advise people that when you're in a storm, worry about the hole in your hull rather than going out in the seas and looking for more ships, right? So I think once the storm is past, you've fixed your hole, there will be some sailboats waiting for rescue. But I think this buy versus sell, owner operator, I just think some of these discussions are great for coffee table, but I do think I tell people sometimes, I tell my wife that if I didn't have a business to worry about, this is how retirement would be. So it's a precursor to a retirement, but unfortunately there's always a business that keeps you quite worried through the day. I think, listen, it's been a wake-up call, Manav. When you have capital invested, the first note I sent to my board, and it said that we never saw it coming, and to that extent we failed. And I think that we need to take responsibility for the fact that a complete failure was never a part of the business plan. None of us ever wrote a business plan where we said the revenues will be 0 for 6 months. And if there's any lesson for us for future, is rather than learning a recipe, which you can always learn when the times are better, I need to figure out that can I re-engineer a business for 0 revenues to reoccur yet again? What happens once repeats itself, right? So I think we need to all go back and think seriously about, as I repeated, high fixed cost, inability to hold with 0 revenues for even 2, 3, 4 months. We were always on the edge in terms of financial returns as a sector. We've now been pushed into the abyss. So I think there's time for serious introspection. Your next HICSA should have a completely different set of panel discussions than you've had in the last 10, 12 years. As far as books, movies, I don't remember, honestly.